If you have $45,000 in your account, you can buy a Tesla Model 3 today. And if you do buy one, your balance instantly drops close to zero, if not zero. For a long time, that decision was simple. You had the money, you wanted the car, you bought it. But here's the part most people never stop to question. What if the smartest move is not buying the car, even though you can afford it? Because there's a version of that same $45,000 that buys the exact same Tesla without ever leaving your account. And that idea only exists because of what's happening right now. Artificial intelligence is projected to add over $15 trillion to the global economy by 2030, changing how capital grows and who captures that growth. That's the situation John is in, choosing between spending money the old way or letting AI change what it can become. In this video, I'm breaking down the top 5 AI ETFs for 2026 and showing how artificial intelligence creates completely different financial timelines from the same starting point. You'll see how conservative and aggressive AI ETFs grow at very different speeds and how those differences actually play out in real life. Some AI ETFs can take 7 or 8 years to get you there. Others cut that down to around 5. And in the end, I'll show you an AI ETF that allows John to buy a $45,000 Tesla Model 3 in less than 3 years, using only AI investment gains while his original money stays intact. Now, let's make this real. John has done the responsible thing. He's saved up $45,000. There's no debt tied to it, no leverage, just cash sitting there waiting for a decision. John has his eye on a Tesla Model 3. Not a fancy purchase, not a supercar, just a clean, modern car that costs right around $45,000. If he wants it, he can walk into a dealership today, sign the paperwork, and drive it home. But the moment he does that, his account balance drops to a big fat zero. That's the part most people don't think about. They focus on the purchase, not the aftermath. Because when you have $45,000 sitting in your account, you have options, you have flexibility, you have breathing room. Unexpected expenses don't feel urgent, decisions don't feel rushed. But when that account drops close to zero, everything feels different. Even small problems feel bigger. Every surprise expense creates stress. There's no cushion, no margin for error, no room to think. The money isn't just gone. The comfort that came with it is gone too. That's the part most people don't factor in. They focus on owning the car, not what it feels like afterward. The moment the money leaves the account, it stops providing security, it stops creating options, it stops working entirely. John isn't struggling to afford the car, that's not the problem. The problem is what happens after the money leaves his account. Once it's spent, it stops working for him entirely. So instead of asking the usual question, can I afford this? John pauses and asks a better question. Is there a way to get the car without wiping out everything he's built? This is where the thinking changes. Most people handle money in the same order. They save, they spend, and whatever's left over becomes an afterthought. Wealth works in reverse. You protect the core first, and you let growth do the heavy lifting. John sets one simple rule. The $45,000 stays untouched. No dipping into it, no shaving a little off the top. That money remains the engine. The Tesla doesn't get paid for by sacrifice, it gets paid for by returns. To make this work, John needs something that can actually move the needle. For most people, the obvious next move is a savings account. Listen, on paper, a savings account feels responsible. Your money is safe, the balance moves slowly upward, and that sense of stability is comforting. But stability has a cost. Right now, even a good high-yield savings account pays around 4 to 5% a year, if that. On $45,000, that's roughly $1,800 to $2,250 in gains per year. Now think about John's goal. He needs another $45,000 in gains to pay for the Tesla without touching his original money. At savings account returns, that means waiting about 20 to 25 years. See, that's the issue. The money isn't shrinking, but it isn't moving fast enough to matter. Inflation keeps going, while the goal barely gets closer. Savings accounts are useful for emergencies. They're not designed to turn $45,000 into another $45,000. And when the goal is buying a car without emptying your account, slow growth becomes the bottleneck. If John wants the Tesla paid for by growth instead of waiting decades, he needs something faster than a savings account. This is where most people get stuck. They know savings won't work, but picking individual stocks, well, that feels like guessing. One bad decision can erase years of progress, and most people don't want to track dozens of companies. That's where ETFs come in. An ETF lets you invest in a basket of stocks instead of a single stock. Rather than betting on one AI company, your money is spread across the businesses building AI, supplying it, and putting it to work. If one company struggles, others keep it moving. That matters with AI because no one knows exactly where the biggest winners will come from. Software, chips, automation, data centers, it's all connected. AI ETFs let you benefit from the industry's growth without needing to be right about every detail. For John, this makes the challenge simple. Same $45,000, same Tesla. The only thing that changes is the path he takes to get there. Different AI ETFs move at different speeds. Some are steady, some are aggressive, and the difference between them isn't small. It can mean waiting nearly a decade or reaching the same goal in just a few years. So instead of guessing which one sounds best, John ranks them by one thing only: how fast each ETF can realistically pay for the Tesla without touching his original money. And at number 5 on John's list is the slowest but most conservative option, the Robo Global Robotics and Automation Index ETF, ticker symbol ROBO. This ETF focuses on robotics and automation, technology that's already deeply embedded in the global economy. Factory robots, warehouse automation, and systems that help businesses produce more with fewer human hours. This isn't futuristic speculation, it's practical. Companies have invested in automation for decades because it lowers costs, improves efficiency, and reduces errors. Robo captures that steady industrial side of AI adoption by holding a broad mix of companies that build robots, design automation software, and supply the components that make these systems work. What makes Robo stand out is its history. The ETF has been around long enough to move through multiple market cycles. It doesn't rely on hype or sudden breakthroughs. It grows as automation continues to expand across manufacturing, logistics, and global supply chains. That steady nature shows up in its recent performance. Over the last year, Robo returned about 21.8%. That's not explosive compared to some of the other ETFs we'll look at, but it's solid and consistent. It shows that automation continues to move forward even when markets get noisy. But the more important story shows up when you zoom out. Over the last 10 years, Robo is up roughly 235%. It shows this ETF isn't relying on one good year. It's been carried by a long-term trend of rising automation across manufacturing, logistics, and global supply chains. When you average that long-term growth out, Robo's compound annual growth rate comes in at about 13.1%. That's the number we use because short-term returns can be misleading. One strong year or one weak year doesn't tell you how an investment actually behaves. CAGR smooths out the ups and downs and shows how fast the ETF has realistically grown over time. Now translate that into John's goal. At a 13.1% average annual return, John's $45,000 generates roughly $5,900 per year in gains. At that pace, it would take John about 7 years and 6 months to generate the $45,000 needed to buy the Tesla without touching his original money. So that's good and way faster than the traditional savings account, but there are even better options to come. And in the end, I'll show you an AI ETF that could help John buy a Tesla Model 3 in less than 3 years. So Robo sets the baseline. It's steady, conservative, and predictable. Not the fastest path on the list, but it clearly shows how much stronger long-term AI-driven growth is compared to letting money sit in savings accounts, which took over 20 years. And at number 4 on John's list is a broader, faster-moving option, the Global X Artificial Intelligence and Technology ETF, ticker symbol AIQ. AIQ widens the lens beyond automation and into the full artificial intelligence ecosystem. Instead of focusing mainly on robots and factories, this ETF invests in companies that are building AI technology and companies that are actively using it to grow their businesses. AIQ holds software platforms, cloud infrastructure providers, data-driven businesses, and companies that are integrating AI directly into their products and services. It's designed to capture AI growth wherever it shows up, not just in one corner of the economy. This makes AIQ feel like a more direct bet on artificial intelligence itself. As AI spreads across industries, companies don't all benefit in the same way, but AIQ is positioned to ride that broader adoption curve. When AI becomes a standard tool rather than a novelty, funds like this tend to benefit. That broader exposure shows up in its recent performance. Over the past year, AIQ returned about 28.7%. That's a clear step up from the more conservative automation-focused approach. It reflects stronger momentum as AI moves from experimentation into real-world development. But again, the real insight comes from looking beyond a single year. Since its inception, AIQ is up around 250%. AIQ launched in 2018, which means it reached that level of growth in about 7 years. That's an important comparison point. Robo, the conservative option at number 5, delivered a similar overall return of about 235%, but it took roughly 10 years to do it. Same level of performance, shorter timeline. When you smooth AIQ's long-term growth into a yearly pace, its compound annual growth rate comes out to around 20.4%. And at 20.4% average annual return, John's $45,000 generates roughly $9,100 per year in gains. At that pace, John reaches the $45,000 needed to buy the Tesla in about 4 years and 11 months, using gains only and leaving his original money untouched. This is where the acceleration becomes obvious. By widening the exposure from automation to the full AI ecosystem, the timeline drops from 7+ years to under 5. And from here, the speed only increases. At number 3 on John's list is the Van Eck Semiconductor ETF, ticker symbol SMH. SMH takes the conversation one layer deeper. Instead of focusing on the companies using AI, this ETF focuses on the companies that make AI possible in the first place. Semiconductors are the backbone of artificial intelligence. Every model, every data center, every AI-powered product depends on advanced chips to function. Without semiconductors, AI is just a theory. With them, it scales. SMH invests in the companies designing and manufacturing those chips. These are the businesses supplying the computing power that trains models, runs algorithms, and processes massive amounts of data. As AI adoption grows, demand for semiconductors compounds across industries. That's why this part of the market tends to move fast when AI spending accelerates. Over the last year, SMH returned about 49.9%. That kind of performance reflects how critical chips have become as companies race to build AI infrastructure. Over the long term, SMH has delivered powerful growth across multiple market cycles as global demand for computing power has steadily increased. When you smooth out that long-term performance into a yearly pace, SMH's compound annual growth rate comes out to around 28.5%. Now translate that speed into John's goal. At 28.5% average annual return, John's $45,000 grows to roughly $12,800 per year in gains. And at that pace, John would generate the $45,000 needed to buy the Tesla in about 3 years and 6 months without touching his original capital. This is where timelines start to collapse. The goal that once felt decades away, then 5 years away, suddenly moves into a much shorter window. Not by taking wild bets, but by owning the part of the AI ecosystem that everything else depends on. Now, at number 2 on John's list is the ARK Autonomous Technology and Robotics ETF, ticker symbol ARKQ. ARKQ shifts the focus from infrastructure to disruption. This ETF is built around technologies that aim to change how the world actually functions day to day. Autonomous vehicles, advanced robotics, energy storage, and systems that reduce the need for human input altogether. It's less about supporting AI in the background and more about pushing it directly into the real world. That approach comes with more movement. ARKQ leans into technologies early, before outcomes are fully priced in. That creates bigger swings, but it also creates the potential for much faster progress when those technologies take hold. That aggressive posture shows up clearly in recent performance. Over the last year, ARKQ returned about 53%. That kind of move isn't normal for traditional investments. It reflects how quickly capital flows toward companies that are redefining entire industries. Over the last 10 years, ARKQ is up over 700%. That means it delivered several times the total return of more conservative AI ETFs across a full decade that included strong markets, sharp pullbacks, and periods of heavy volatility. When you smooth out that decade of growth into a yearly pace, ARKQ's compound annual growth rate comes out to around 32.9%. At that pace, John's $45,000 grows roughly $14,800 per year in gains. And at that pace, John would reach the $45,000 needed to buy the Tesla in about 3 years. And so John asks one final question. Can it get even faster? So finally, at number 1 on John's list is the fastest option of them all, the Roundhill Generative AI and Technology ETF, ticker symbol CHAT. Chat takes everything we've talked about so far and pulls it into the present moment. This ETF is built around generative AI, the part of artificial intelligence that directly produces work. Writing, coding, design, analysis, customer support. These tools aren't experimental anymore. They're already changing how companies operate and how quickly they can scale. What makes Chat different from the rest of the lineup is how it's managed. It isn't passively tracking an index, it's actively managed, meaning a team is constantly adjusting holdings as the generative AI landscape evolves. When new leaders emerge, the fund can adapt. When momentum shifts, it can respond. That flexibility matters in a space moving this fast. Generative AI is one of the few technologies being adopted across almost every industry at the same time. That momentum is visible in the short term. Over the last year, Chat returned about 39.4%. Strong, but not reckless. It reflects real revenue growth tied to productivity gains, not just excitement. But the more revealing story comes from zooming out. Chat launched in 2023, and since inception, it's up around 139%. That means it has delivered that level of growth in roughly 2 to 3 years, far faster than any other ETF on this list reached similar gains. Since inception growth into a yearly pace, Chat's compound annual growth rate comes out to around 36.8%. At this average annual return, John's $45,000 produces roughly $16,500 per year in gains. And at that pace, John reaches the $45,000 needed to buy the Tesla in about 2 years and 8 months. This is the fastest path in the entire group. Now, this chart tells a simple but powerful story about how your financial future changes based on the choices you make. On the far right, you see the familiar savings account, safe, predictable, and painfully slow. At current rates, it takes about 20 years just to generate the $45,000 John needs, 2 full decades of waiting. Now look what happens when the path changes. Robo is the first step away from savings. It's conservative, steady, and reliable, but even then, it cuts the timeline down to about 7 years and 6 months. That alone is a dramatic improvement. Move one step faster, and you reach AIQ. By expanding beyond automation into the broader AI ecosystem, the wait drops to about 4 years and 11 months. SMH compresses the timeline again to about 3 years and 6 months by focusing on the semiconductor backbone of AI. ARKQ pushes it to around 3 years by leaning into disruptive technologies. And at the front is chat. Generative AI and real-world adoption drive the fastest results, about 2 years and 8 months to reach the same goal using gains alone. Same starting money, same $45,000 target. The only thing that changes is the strategy, and the difference is measured in years of your life. Want to see how a simple dividend portfolio can generate $4,800 a month, starting with as little as $20 a week? Click the video on the screen to see exactly how it's built.